You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, like it's totally scientific.
Exactly. It's almost like engineering.
Mm.
If you fall and break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an x-ray, and it shows that stark, jagged white line against the black background.
Yeah, the doctor just points at it and says, there it is. There's the problem.
It's binary.
Yeah.
You are either injured or you are not. It's categorized, it's clean, and frankly, it's very comforting because you can see exactly what you were dealing with.
And then
But then you step out of the hospital and into the world of everyday spoken English.
oh man, and suddenly it feels like that x-ray machine is completely broken.
Completely shattered.
Yeah.
Because the people listening to us right now, you guys, the B1 and B2 level English learners, you are in a really unique, incredibly frustrating stage of your journey.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
You've spent years studying the grammar. You know the vocabulary. You literally have the structural blueprints of the language memorized in your head.
But then you step off a plane in London or New York, right?
Yes, and someone asks you a casual everyday question, and you're suddenly staring at a linguistic landscape that is just, it's completely murky.
There are no clear lines at all.
None. Everything just sounds like a fast, messy, continuous blur of noise.
It is the absolute definition of linguistic muddy waters. And, the frustration you feel is entirely justified.
Because it's not their fault.
Right, not at all. Your brain has been trained in a fundamentally different environment. Like you learned in a sterile classroom.
With those perfectly crisp audio CDs.
Exactly. The audio tracks you listened to featured voice actors who perfectly enunciated every single syllable. There was a clear micropause between each word.
He was nice for a beginner, but
But that is not how language exists in the wild.
it's universally exhausting. You have this learner who can read an advanced English newspaper with no problem. They can probably write a flawless corporate email.
Oh, easy.
But then they hear native speakers in a coffee shop, and the words just bleed into each other. And worse, when it's their turn to speak, they feel this crushing awareness that they sound like a textbook.
Yeah, instead of a real living person.
Right. They give these perfectly grammatical, incredibly rigid answers, while everyone around them is using this loose, colorful, flowing language.
Which creates a profound sense of isolation, When you reach that intermediate or upper intermediate level, the B1 or B2, you have complex thoughts.
You're an intelligent adult.
Exactly. You have deep emotions and sophisticated opinions that you really want to share, but your output feels robotic.
It's so frustrating.
I like to think of it as having the engine of a high-performance sports car. Like, that's your intellect and your native language complexity,
Right.
but the transmission connecting it to your English output is completely stuck in first gear.
That is the exact gap we are going to bridge today. Because fluency isn't just about downloading another 500 vocabulary words into your brain, is it?
No, not even close.
So the materials we are unpacking today, we've got this massive stack of sources, ranging from deep linguistic breakdowns of phrasal verbs to the actual cognitive science of how we process audio.
We even have professional audio engineering tricks in here.
Yeah, it's wild. And they all point to one thing. You have to retrain your brain to handle the reality of the language. And you cannot fix your speech if you don't first fix your ears.
So true. Ears first, mouth second.
So I want to start there with active listening, because I was looking through some of these linguistic guides, and it seems like a lot of advanced learners are actually setting themselves up for failure by throwing themselves into the deep end of native audio.
They absolutely are. There is this incredibly pervasive myth in language learning that if you just surround yourself with native chaos, your brain will magically adapt.
Like through osmosis or something.
Exactly. People will tell you, oh, just turn on a fast-paced comedy movie without subtitles, listen to the rapid-fire slang and the cultural jokes, and eventually, you'll just get it.
I've heard that advice so many times. Does it work?
Neurologically speaking, if you are at a B1 level and you do that, it is the worst possible strategy.
Wait, really? The worst?
Yes, because it leads directly to cognitive exhaustion.
Okay, I always pictured it like a computer's RAM. Like your working memory only has so much space.
That's a great way to look at it.
When you hear a stream of incredibly fast audio filled with unfamiliar slang, your brain starts trying to process the first sentence. But while you're stuck trying to figure out what one idiom meant, the native speaker has already said 3 more sentences.
Right, they've moved on completely.
And your working memory buffer just overflows, it flushes out all the audio, and your mind essentially goes blank. Is that what's happening?
That is a perfect analogy. The cognitive load simply maxes out. When your brain is overwhelmed like that, it doesn't learn.
It just gives up.
It panics. It panics and shuts down to protect itself from the stress. This is where the concept of comprehensible input comes in.
Which the materials refer to as the just above rule.
Right. Exactly, the just above rule. Your brain only forms new neural pathways for language when the material is just a slight step above your current level.
So not too easy, not too hard.
Right. If it's too easy, there's no growth. But if you listen to a clear, articulate podcast designed for learners, your brain has enough foundational understanding to follow the narrative.
You have enough available RAM to guess the meaning of the missing words.
Exactly. You can guess that 5% of words you don't know based on the context, and that's where actual neurological adaptation happens.
But, reading through the suggested listening techniques in our sources, there's one that immediately raised a red flag for me.
Which one?
The idea of extreme repetition. Taking a 1-minute clip of audio and listening to it 3, 4, or even 5 times.
Yes.
On the surface, that sounds incredibly tedious. It sounds like rote memorization, which is exactly the kind of sterile classroom learning we're trying to escape. Like, won't I just get bored?
It does sound counterintuitive. I'll give you that. But we have to separate repetition for the sake of memorization from repetition for the sake of layered understanding.
Layered understanding.
Yeah. When you first listen to a fast-paced, real-world interaction, your brain's processing power is entirely consumed by situational awareness. It's just trying to map the environment.
Give me a tangible example of how that layered processing actually works for a learner.
Okay, let's take a busy coffee shop scenario. You play a 1-minute clip of native speakers. On the first listen, your brain is just asking, what is the primary action here?
Like, who is even talking?
Right. It processes the background clatter, it recognizes a male voice and a female voice, and it deduces, okay, a man is placing an order with a barista.
And just establishing that baseline reality took all your cognitive energy.
It really did. Because the RAM was full, you literally didn't have the capacity to hear the specifics. The words physically entered your ear, but your brain didn't have the bandwidth to decode them.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. But now you play it a second time. The what is happening question is already solved. Your brain doesn't have to spend a single drop of energy establishing the scenario.
So the focus automatically shifts.
Yes. Now you start catching lexical details. You hear that he wants a large, dark roast coffee and a toasted cheese sandwich.
And this is where the magic happens on the third listen, right?
Yeah.
Because the scenario is established, the nouns and verbs are mapped. So what is left for the brain to focus on?
The microphonetics, the
Right.
connected speech. On the third listen, you finally have the bandwidth to realize that the barista didn't clearly articulate the phrase, is this for here or to go?
Oh, she probably mumbled it.
Exactly. You realize she actually mumbled something that sounded like, fair to go, and he rapidly shot back, to go, please.
But wait, the audio file never changed? It was the exact same recording.
That's the beauty of it. What changed was your cognitive bandwidth freeing up layer by layer, allowing you to finally process native-level phonetics.
That completely reframes it.
Yeah.
You aren't repeating to memorize a script.
Yeah.
You're repeating to peer back the layers of the audio.
Exactly.
But what about the moments when you hit a word you just flat out don't know? Because the sources emphasize this psychological shift, prioritizing context over perfection.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I know so many learners who have this perfectionist complex. If they don't understand 100% of the words, they feel like they are completely failing.
And that perfectionism is the absolute enemy of fluency. When learners hit an unknown word, they treat it like a pothole. They stop the car, get out, and stare at it.
Which is a terrible idea on a highway.
Right. There's a great example in our notes. A native speaker tells a story and says, I was running late, so I grabbed a bite before the meeting.
Okay, so if you don't know the idiom grabbed a bite, your brain just derails.
Totally derails.
You hear the word bite. You think of a dog biting someone. You start wondering, did this guy get attacked by an animal on his way to work? Why is everyone else in the room nodding normally?
Yeah, you're having an internal crisis.
And while you are frozen in that internal panic, the speaker keeps talking.
And you miss the next 5 sentences. You miss the entire point of the story because you fixated on a blurry spot in the X-ray.
So how do you fix that?
To fix this, you have to train yourself to accept the blur. You have to rely on deductive reasoning. You heard running late and you heard meeting. Logically, what physical action do you take when you are pressed for time before an obligation?
You eat quickly.
Exactly. You deduce that grabbed a bite must mean eating fast. You let go of the need for an exact dictionary translation, and you keep moving with the flow of the conversation.
That concept of flow perfectly transitions into what linguists call connected speech. This is the real reason the X-ray is broken.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to talk about this because it completely blew my mind when I realized the mechanics behind it. I always pictured spoken English like a string of pearls. Each word is a distinct, separate thing on the necklace.
But it's not.
No, native speech is actually more like water flowing over river stones. The speed and the current literally erode the hard edges of the words until they just blend into one continuous shape.
The river analogy is spot on. In linguistics, this process involves elision, which is the complete dropping of sounds, and assimilation, where sounds physically change shape to blend into the next word.
So the textbook teaches you the distinct pearls, like, what are you going to do?
But the rushing river of a native speaker in a hurry erodes that into, what you gonna do?
Or the most extreme example I found in the materials, which is hilarious, the phrase, did you eat yet?
Yes, a classic. Jeet yet.
Jeet yet. It literally sounds like a greeting in a science fiction movie. How do you get from 4 distinct words, did you eat yet, to 2 syllables?
Well, it's the path of least physical resistance for the mouth. The hard D of did and the Y of you smash together at high speed and create that J sound. So did you becomes Jew.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then eat gets swallowed, leaving just the E sound. So you have jeet, and yet just attaches to the end, jeet yet.
That is wild.
It is. And if your ears are only calibrated for the sterile classroom audio, a native speaker saying jeet yet will leave you entirely lost. You don't need to become a master phonetician, but you do have to accept that English words physically alter their shape based on the words right next to them.
So how do we actively practice this? The materials highlight a few targeted techniques, and one that stood out to me was purposeful listening.
Yeah, that's a game changer.
The idea is that you shouldn't just hit play on a podcast and let the audio wash over you while you wash the dishes. You have to give your brain a specific job before the audio even starts.
Because that mimics reality, right? In real life, we rarely listen passively. We listen to gather specific information.
Right.
Before you press play on a practice video, ask yourself a question like, why is the woman in this story upset? Or what specific excuse does the man use at the end?
So you're giving your brain a target.
Exactly. When you listen with a directive, your brain filters out the noise and hunts for the context clues. You start listening like a detective.
Another technique that really resonated with me is topic-based listening, or building lexical networks.
Yes.
Because I used to think the best way to learn was massive variety. Like listen to a science podcast on Monday, a comedy show on Tuesday, and political news on Wednesday. But the recommendation here is actually the exact opposite.
Variety is great for general interest, sure, but for language acquisition, depth is better than breadth. If you dedicate an entire week to one specific subject, let's say, the airline industry, you are building a dense lexical network.
So I'd watch an airport travel vlog on Monday.
Yep. Tuesday, maybe a podcast about lost luggage. Wednesday, an interview with a pilot.
And the magic is that the vocabulary compounds. You hear the words boarding gate, layover, customs, and turbulence in 10 different contexts over 5 days.
Precisely. On Monday, hearing the word layover might require half a second of mental translation, but by Friday, you've heard it 30 times.
So you don't even have to think about it.
Your brain no longer translates it. It just visualizes the concept instantly. You build a deep contextual familiarity that drastically increases your processing speed.
And a quick note on transcripts, because I know learners love having the subtitles on. The absolute golden rule here is do not read the transcript before you listen.
Oh, never. If you are reading while the audio plays for the first time, you are practicing reading.
Not listening.
Right. The text becomes a crutch and your ears get lazy. The struggle is the point. You have to listen first, embrace the blur, and see what you can deduce.
And then what?
Then, on the second or third pass, you pull up the transcript. You use it as an autopsy tool. You find the exact gap between what you thought the speaker said and what they actually said.
That aha moment.
Exactly. That moment of realization where you say, oh, that's why it sounded like that. That is where permanent learning occurs.
Okay, so we've tuned our ears, we are actively listening, we understand the river of connected speech, and the blur is starting to slow down.
We're making progress.
But then we hit the second major wall. You are having a conversation, your ears are working perfectly, and you clearly hear the words give and up. But the person isn't physically handing something to the ceiling.
No, they are not.
The vocabulary itself has shifted under your feet. Which brings us to the native speaker's ultimate secret weapon, phrasal verbs.
Oh boy, the bane of existence for every English learner worldwide.
Now, I know you guys listening to this already know the textbook definition of a phrasal verb. A verb attached to a preposition or an adverb that creates a new meaning. You know what they are.
Right, the definition isn't the issue.
The problem is the sheer volume of them and how totally illogical they seem.
It feels like an act of linguistic cruelty, honestly, because you learn the base verb look and your brain categorizes it. Okay, look means to use my eyes.
Very simple.
But then English takes these tiny spatial words up, down, in, out, and attaches them, creating a completely unrelated universe of meaning. Like, look up means to search for information.
Or look down on means to feel arrogant or superior.
Look after means to care for someone. Look forward to means to anticipate the future. It's madness.
And this is why staring at an alphabetical flashcard list of phrasal verbs is a recipe for absolute misery.
Oh, please don't do that.
If you try to memorize every phrasal verb that starts with get or look, your brain has no logical framework to hang that information on. The sources we are analyzing are adamant about this. You have to abandon alphabetical lists and group them by context, or even better, by their underlying spatial logic.
The spatial logic is fascinating. Take the word up. In English, up often subconsciously symbolizes completion or reaching a maximum limit.
That is such a light bulb moment. So if I say eat your vegetables, it's a general command. But if I say eat up, I'm telling you to finish everything on the plate until it's completely gone.
Exactly. Clean the house means do some chores. Clean up the house means restore it to its maximum state of order.
Drink up, use it up.
Right. The preposition isn't just random, it's carrying a spatial metaphor about completion. When learners start seeing these patterns, it demystifies the language.
Let's apply this contextual strategy to daily life. Let's walk through a standard morning routine because it perfectly illustrates how inescapable these verbs are and why using formal equivalents makes you sound like an alien.
Let's do it. So, the alarm rings. The very first thing your brain does is transition from sleep to consciousness. You wake up.
But crucially, waking up is entirely mental. Because I can wake up at 6 a.m., stare at the ceiling, grab my phone, and stay horizontally under the blankets for another 45 minutes.
We've all been there.
It isn't until 6145 that I actually get up.
Right. Get up is the physical, spatial action of elevating your body out of the bed. Already the nuance is vital. So you get up, you take off your sleepwear, removing it from your body, and you put on your clothes.
Then you walk into the kitchen.
You turn on the coffee machine, you clean up the counter, and you throw away yesterday's mail.
Just in the first 10 minutes of being conscious, we used wake up, get up, take off, put on, turn on, clean up, and throw away. 7 phrasal verbs.
And it felt completely natural.
But if a learner translated their native language directly and said, I became conscious, I arose, I removed my pajamas, I clothed myself, I activated the machine, I sanitized the surface, and I discarded the paper, they would be perfectly grammatical.
But they would sound like a time-traveling Victorian aristocrat.
Or a police report. Phrasal verbs provide the casual rhythm of human life. They carry a physical weight to them.
Think about the workplace. If you miss a meeting, you ask a coworker to fill you in.
I love that one because it's so visual. You are essentially saying, my brain is currently an empty container regarding that meeting. Please pour the facts into me. Fill me in.
Exactly. Or, if you are behind on your tasks, you have to catch up. It invokes the physical image of running a race, realizing you are behind the pack, and sprinting to reach the same position as everyone else.
But let me push back on behalf of the frustrated learner here. I completely get the spatial metaphor, and I get the context, but there are still moments where English just seems actively malicious.
Fair enough. Give me an example.
Take the verbs get up and give up. They sound virtually identical in casual speech. They're one letter apart. But get up is the physical act of rising from a chair, and give up is the profound emotional collapse of surrendering your hopes and quitting.
Yeah, that is brutal.
How is a learner supposed to manage that in real time?
It's a deeply fair criticism. It is confusing. But the answer circles back to what we discussed with listening. Context is everything. You'll never overcome the get up versus give up confusion by staring at a vocabulary list.
So how do you do it?
You overcome it by encountering it in a narrative. If someone tells a story and says, the marathon was brutal, his legs were cramping, but he didn't give up, your brain logically deduces that he didn't quit.
You wouldn't think he didn't stand out of a chair.
Right. If you isolate the words, they are confusing. If you embed them in a story, the meaning is obvious.
So what is the practical day-to-day strategy here? Because you can't learn 3,000 phrasal verbs by tomorrow.
The strategy is extreme limitation and patience. Native speakers took over a decade of childhood immersion to master these nuances. For an adult learner, the recommendation is to pick a maximum of 5 phrasal verbs per week.
Just 5.
Just 5.
Quality over quantity.
Entirely. Write those 5 down on a Post-it note, stick it on your bathroom mirror, and then for those 7 days, actively hunt for opportunities to force those 5 verbs into your daily conversations or emails.
So if your verb is turn out, as in how something ended up, you force yourself to say, the meeting turned out well.
Yes. By Friday, that verb isn't just memorized, it is a permanent part of your active recall.
Okay, so we've got the listening locked in, and we are slowly integrating the physical, spatial flow of phrasal verbs. You have the structural bricks of the language.
But there is a third element.
Yes, because I know people who have pristine grammar. They use phrasal verbs flawlessly, yet when they speak, they still sound jerky. They sound like a perfectly programmed android.
It's very common.
And reading through these linguistic papers, I realized what they are missing. They are missing the absolute lifeblood of human interaction, fillers and connectors.
This is perhaps the most heavily stigmatized area of language learning. For decades, traditional rigid language classes have actively punished students for using filler words.
My teachers definitely did.
They tell you that saying, well, or, is a sign of a poor vocabulary or a lack of intelligence.
I'll admit, I always view them as a glitch. Just a bad habit, like your brain's engine stuttering while it searches for the right gear.
But these sources reframe them entirely. Linguists don't call them mistakes. They call them discourse markers. And apparently, native speakers use them constantly.
Constantly.
The statistics are staggering. In spontaneous, casual conversation, native English speakers deploy a discourse marker roughly 6 to 8 times every single minute.
Wow, that is 1 every 10 seconds.
Right. You cannot call something a mistake if the entire native population uses it constantly. They are highly evolved social tools that serve 3 distinct psychological functions.
I really want to unpack these because once I read about them, I started noticing myself doing it constantly. The first function is buying time, right?
Yes. Human thought is rarely perfectly sequential. When you are asked a complex question, your brain needs a few seconds to organize the syntax.
And if you just stand there in absolute terrified silence.
The person you are talking to gets uncomfortable. They might think you didn't hear them or that you are ignoring them.
So the well, is essentially an audio loading bar. It's a signal that says, please hold, my brain is working, do not interrupt me.
Precisely. It maintains your turn in the conversation while you think. The second function is perhaps even more crucial for non-native speakers, softening the blow.
What do you mean by that?
Well, English-speaking cultures, generally speaking, value a degree of politeness and face-saving. Directness can easily be misinterpreted as aggression.
Give me an example of how a filler acts as a cushion there.
Okay, let's say your colleague pitches an idea and they ask, do you think this marketing plan will work? If you just look at them and say, no, the budget is too small.
Ouch. That is factually accurate, but socially, it's a sledgehammer. It feels hostile.
Right. But if I use a filler, if I say, well, I like the concept, but actually I'm worried about the budget.
Oh, that's completely different.
Exactly. The word well is doing massive heavy lifting there. It signals to the listener, I have heard you, I am considering your input, but I am about to offer a nuanced, slightly contrary opinion.
It braces them for the impact.
And the word actually further softens the correction.
Then there's the third function, which is continuous social connection. This brings up the phrase, you know, which is literally everywhere, like, it's just been a really long week,
You know, is a beautiful piece of back channeling. It is an active check-in. It invites the listener to empathize. It asks, are you following my emotional state? Do you share this human experience?
It turns a monologue into a shared connection. Let's talk about connectors, which are slightly more structured than fillers. If fillers are the cushions, connectors are the steering wheel. They steer the emotional direction of the chat. And the biggest hurdle for B2 learners is learning how to disagree politely.
Because again, a flat, you are wrong, destroys rapport. A native speaker uses a connector to validate the other person before introducing conflict. Like, I see what you mean, but, or, that's a totally fair point, however.
You were acknowledging their reality before you introduce your own.
It keeps the conversation cooperative rather than combative.
Another fascinating cultural difference the materials brought up is how we handle listening itself. In some cultures, if you are speaking, The most respectful thing I can do is sit in total stoic silence until you finish.
Oh, but if you do that to an American or a Brit, they will start to panic.
Really?
Panic.
Oh yeah, they will assume you are bored, angry, or that the Zoom call just froze.
Mm.
In English, active listening is noisy. You have to use connectors to feed energy back to the speaker.
Like dropping in phrases like, no way, or are you serious? Yes, or even just a drawn out, really. It shows you are engaged with the narrative.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because I know the corporate professionals listening to this are thinking,
Lay on me.
if I am going into a high-stakes job interview at a bank in London, or I'm pitching a startup to investors in Silicon Valley, isn't using, like, going to make me sound incredibly unprofessional and unprepared?
It is a totally valid fear, and the nuance here is moderation. There is a vast difference between strategic discourse markers and a nervous verbal to pack. Using a thoughtful, that's a really great question, let me think about that, shows immense poise under pressure.
Or saying, well,
Yeah.
before outlining a complex problem shows you are structuring your thoughts.
But the machine gun approach is the problem. If you use the word like as your only crutch, like I was like managing the team and it was like really hard, to like meet the deadline, that undermines your authority, it's distracting.
Right, that's just too much.
The best analogy I've heard is that filler words should function exactly like background music in a nice restaurant.
Oh, I like that.
It's there to fill the dead air and set a comfortable mood. But if the music is so loud that the customers are actively noticing the song, it's ruining the meal.
That makes perfect sense.
If your interviewer is consciously noticing your fellers, you're using too many. But if you strip the music away entirely, the restaurant feels awkward and sterile.
Background music. That is perfect. You need just enough to make the conversation feel human. So we've got the rhythm of connected speech, the physical verbs, and the social glue of fillers.
What's next?
Now we are moving into the territory that truly separates the intermediate from the advanced. We are going to add the color. I'm talking about idioms.
Idioms are the wildest part of any language because they are phrases that, if translated word for word, make absolutely zero logical sense.
None at all.
But they carry immense cultural and emotional weight.
And the immediate trap learners fall into, and our sources vehemently warn against this, is trying to memorize dictionaries of idioms. A is for apple of my eye, B is for barking up the wrong tree.
It is useless because you strip them of their context. The real skill of a B2 speaker isn't knowing every single idiom. It's the ability to deduce the meaning of an unknown idiom in real time.
It's about becoming a linguistic detective. When someone uses a phrase that sounds bizarre, you look at their facial expression, you look at the tone of the conversation, and you analyze the underlying metaphor.
Let's do a deep dive on a few of these because unpacking the history and the metaphor reveals so much about how English speakers think.
Okay, in the Seagull documentation, there's a lovely story about a couple. They say that when they first met, they got on like a house on fire, which led to a wonderful 30-year marriage. However, they admit that in the early passionate days, they had quite a few blazing rows.
This is a brilliant example of deductive reasoning based on its central metaphor, fire. Fire is a dual-natured element. It provides vital warmth, but it is also violently destructive.
So getting on like a house on fire, if you take that literally, a house burning down is a tragedy. Why does it mean a good relationship?
Because of the speed and intensity. If a dry wooden house catches fire, the flames spread instantly and consume everything in their path. It is unstoppable.
Wow.
So metaphorically, if two people meet and get on like a house on fire, it means they formed an intense, immediate, and all-consuming connection. There was no awkward small talk. They instantly loved each other's company.
But then you have the destructive side of the metaphor, a blazing row, a row being British slang for a loud argument.
Exactly. The same intense heat and passion that fueled their immediate connection also fuels their conflict. A blazing row isn't a quiet disagreement. It is a loud, explosive, highly emotional fight.
That's fascinating.
By understanding the core metaphor of fire speed, heat, intensity, the learner doesn't need to memorize the dictionary definition. They can feel the meaning.
Let's look at another one. Someone says, I am going to keep searching for my lost wallet until the cows come home. If you are an urban learner in Tokyo or Berlin, cows coming home means absolutely nothing to you.
Which is why we have to look at the historical root. English is deeply rooted in agrarian society. Hundreds of years ago, time wasn't strictly measured by clocks. It was measured by daylight and farm chores.
So, cows.
Cows are notoriously slow, meandering animals. When you let them out to graze in the morning, they wander far away. Bringing them back to the barn at the end of the day is a slow, tedious, time-consuming process that literally takes all day.
So doing something until the cows come home simply means doing it for an incredibly long, almost indefinite amount of time.
Exactly. It carries a sense of stubborn persistence. I will argue this point until the cows come home.
What about workplace idioms? The corporate world is infested with war and combat metaphors. Two colleagues are having a screaming match in the boardroom, and another coworker whispers to you, "I'm just going to keep my head down. I don't want to get caught in the crossfire."
Look at the visual there. Keeping your head down comes directly from trench warfare. If you stick your head up above the trench, you become a target and you get shot.
Brutal.
In an office environment, sticking your head up means volunteering opinions or getting involved in office politics. Keeping your head down means focusing entirely on your own spreadsheet, staying quiet, and surviving the workday.
And the crossfire is the actual argument.
Right. Crossfire is literally when bullets are flying from two opposing directions and you happen to be standing in the middle. Getting caught in the crossfire means taking damage from an argument that has absolutely nothing to do with you.
That paints quite a picture.
The deduction here is simple. If the underlying metaphor is war, the feeling of the idiom is danger and self-preservation.
It changes everything when you realize idioms aren't arbitrary nonsense. They are mini-stories compressed into a few words. And possessing the confidence to unpack those stories in real time is what unlocks the ultimate goal of all this effort.
The big leagues.
Yes, which brings us to the pinnacle of the English journey, leveling up to deep conversations. Moving from the polite B1 exchanges, "How was your weekend? The weather is nice," into the messy, fascinating world of B2 and C1 debate.
This is where language transitions from being a subject you study to a tool you use to explore the world. A B2 conversation requires you to hypothesize, to weigh complex pros and cons, and to navigate nuanced disagreements without causing offense.
The high-level listening materials provided a fantastic framework for this, using a very modern, relatable topic, screen time and smartphone addiction. And what's brilliant is that a B2 conversation doesn't begin like a formal high school debate.
No, it begins with a casual, vulnerable observation. Someone says, "I swear I pick up my phone just to check the weather," and somehow it turns into 45 minutes of staring at videos.
And immediately, the vocabulary required to explore that feeling is incredibly sophisticated. When you look at transcripts of natives discussing this, you don't hear basic phrases like, "I use my phone too much."
You hear highly specific terminology: doom scrolling, falling down a rabbit hole, the power of habit-forming algorithms, the brain chasing cheap dopamine hits, people suffering from digital fatigue, and lacking the mental bandwidth to read a real book.
Those words describe modern psychological states with pinpoint accuracy. Let's do a role play to break down the anatomy of how a B2 learner should engage in this.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want to demonstrate how to play devil's advocate, arguing a point you might not fully believe, purely to stretch the boundaries of the conversation. I'll take the harsh, unsympathetic side, and I want you to push back using everything we've discussed today: fillers, connectors, phrasal verbs, and advanced vocabulary.
Set the scene for me.
We're having coffee, discussing screen time, and I cross my arms and say, "Honestly, I think all this talk about algorithms is just an excuse. It comes down to self-discipline. Yes, the apps want your attention, but at the end of the day, you have a brain and you have hands. Take responsibility. When I feel digital fatigue, I just put the phone in a drawer. It's really that simple."
Okay, as a B2 speaker, my instinct might be to just say, "You're wrong, it's an addiction." But that kills the conversation. So I engineer a response. Well, I definitely see what you mean about personal responsibility, but I think calling it simple is a bit naive. It's not just about a lack of discipline, because my entire livelihood, my work emails, my bank, my family group chats are all tethered to that one device. Taking a break doesn't feel like resting. It feels like totally cutting myself off from society. We are fighting billion-dollar algorithms designed by psychologists to exploit our mental bandwidth. So basically, I don't think it's a fair fight.
That is a masterclass. Let's put that paragraph under the X-ray machine. You started with a softening filler. Well, you deployed a classic connector to validate my point before destroying it. I definitely see what you mean, but
Gotta keep it polite.
you introduced a sharp B2-level critical word, naive. You perfectly executed a spatial phrasal verb, cutting myself off. And you summarized the entire complex thought with a concluding discourse marker, basically.
And importantly, it felt completely cooperative. I vehemently disagreed with your premise, but the linguistic cushioning ensured that we remain friends debating a topic, rather than enemies having a fight. That is the essence of fluency.
The sources list several other incredible topics for learners to use as practice grounds for these exact skills: the impact of artificial intelligence on the job market, the realities of climate change and extreme heat waves, the societal damage of fake news, and the long-term psychological effects of remote work.
Those are phenomenal arenas for practice because there are no easy answers. They force you to use speculative grammar like, what if we tried this approach, or wouldn't that inevitably lead to?
Now, a very important note for our listeners. We just mentioned topics like AI, fake news, and climate change. These are intensely complex, often politically charged subjects that carry strong viewpoints across the global spectrum.
Very strong.
Following our strict show guidelines, we want to be abundantly clear. We are not taking any stance, endorsing any viewpoint, or leaning left or right on any of these issues.
Absolutely not.
We are bringing them up purely because they exist in the provided source material as exceptional frameworks for linguistic practice. The goal is not to tell you what to think about AI or climate change. The goal is to give you the grammatical and conversational tools to express whatever you believe and to critically understand the viewpoints of others. We are entirely impartial guides to the language itself.
Well said. Language is an agnostic tool. Your job is to sharpen the tool so you can carve out your own arguments.
So this brings us to the final, most practical question of the entire deep dive. We have laid out this massive toolkit: active listening, comprehensible input, connected speech, phrasal verbs, discourse markers, deductive idioms, and complex debate frameworks.
A lot.
But what if a learner is sitting in an apartment in a non-English speaking country? They don't have a native speaking colleague to spar with over coffee. They are alone. How do they actually physically practice this without just talking to a wall?
You have to engineer your own immersion environment, and you have to embrace technology. The first, most terrifying, and most effective tool you have is already in your pocket: the voice memo app on your smartphone. You have to start recording yourself speaking.
I can hear a collective groan from the audience right now. Everyone hates the sound of their own voice on a recording. It feels incredibly embarrassing.
It does, but it is neurologically necessary. When you are speaking in real time in a foreign language, your cognitive load is at 100% just trying to generate the words. You literally do not have the mental bandwidth to monitor your own errors.
Because all the RAM is being used to just form the sentence.
Yes, you won't realize that you completely dropped all connected speech, or that you used the wrong phrasal verb, or that you sounded like a rigid robot because you didn't use a single filler word. But when you record a 3-minute monologue, say, arguing the pros and cons of remote work, and then you hit playback, you become your own teacher. You instantly hear the gaps in your fluency.
But there's a huge caveat here, which I learned from the Boris FX audio engineering guides. If your recording sounds terrible, if there's a huge echo, or the microphone is picking up the wind and the traffic outside, you will never listen to it. The friction is too high. You need to create a clean acoustic environment.
And you do not need to spend thousands of dollars on a professional studio to do this. Environment dictates 80% of audio quality. If you sit in your kitchen, which is full of hard tile floors, glass windows, and wooden cabinets, your voice bounces off every surface and creates a horrible, distant echo. It sounds like you are in a cave.
So what's the hack for a learner at home?
The famous closet studio. A walk-in closet is an acoustic marvel because it is a small, enclosed space packed with soft, heavy fabrics, your clothes. The fabric absorbs the sound waves instead of reflecting them. Your voice goes directly into the microphone, creating a rich, intimate, broadcast-quality sound.
And regarding the microphone itself, you don't need a massive mixing board, do you?
No. A modern USB microphone that plugs straight into your laptop is more than enough. But the technique is what matters. You have to maintain a consistent proximity. If you lean in close, your voice gets deep and bass-heavy. If you lean back in your chair to look at your notes, you suddenly sound tiny. You have to lock in your distance.
And the most brilliant technical trick from the sources is creating a noise profile. Before you start your English monologue, you hit record and you just sit in absolute motionless silence for 10 seconds. Don't breathe heavily, don't shuffle papers. Just record the ambient hum of your room, the air conditioning, the distant hum of the refrigerator.
Why do you need a recording of silence?
Because later, if you use any basic audio editing software or the AI-powered voice enhancement tools mentioned in the notes, you feed that 10 seconds of silence into the program. The software analyzes it, creates a digital fingerprint of the bad noise, and then surgically removes that specific hum from your entire recording.
Oh, that's incredibly smart.
It leaves your vocal track sounding pristine, crisp, and professional. And when you sound professional, you actually enjoy listening to your own practice sessions.
That is incredibly practical. And speaking of AI, the Notebook LM source introduces something that honestly feels like science fiction. It solves the ultimate problem, the lack of a conversation partner. You can now use AI to literally generate a custom language partner.
It is the most revolutionary development in self-guided language acquisition I have ever seen. We are moving beyond text-based chatbots. You can now feed an AI language model your personal study notes. Let's say you upload a list of 5 phrasal verbs, an article about artificial intelligence, and a prompt about screen time.
And the AI doesn't just write an essay. You can command it to generate a two-person, highly realistic conversational podcast discussing exactly what you uploaded.
Yes, and as seen in the testing channels, the level of directorial control you have is staggering. You can prompt the AI and say, generate a debate between two hosts. I want them to speak in clearly articulated B2 level American English. I want host A to play devil's advocate, and I want host B to heavily utilize discourse markers like well and yeah.
Or you can force it into other languages if you were studying them. You can command the AI hosts to speak in native Brazilian Portuguese or Parisian French or Castilian Spanish. You are effectively acting as the executive producer of your own personalized language learning radio network.
And the psychological safety this provides is immense. You can listen to these AI hosts deploy the exact idioms and phrasal verbs you are trying to learn, mimicking native intonation perfectly without any fear of human judgment.
No pressure at all.
And then you use podcast script templates to join in. You write bullet points for an interview format, you hit record in your closet studio, and you pretend you are the third host. You force yourself to naturally bridge the gap between your bullet points using connectors and fillers. It builds the real-time muscle memory of fluency in a totally safe environment.
It is a complete closed-loop system for mastery.
We have covered an absolute mountain of ground today. We started in the murky waters of native audio, proving that to fix your mouth, you first have to fix your ears through comprehensible input and active listening. We embraced the rushing river of connected speech.
We decoded the spatial physical logic behind phrasal verbs, learning to group them by the context of our daily lives rather than alphabetical lists. We completely reframed filler words, no longer seeing them as mistakes, but as the essential background music and social glue of human interaction.
We became linguistic detectives, deducing the meaning of idioms from their underlying metaphors of fire, war, and journeys. We role-played the anatomy of a nuanced, polite, yet firm B2-level disagreement. And finally, we explored how to engineer a professional acoustic practice space in your closet and leverage cutting-edge AI to simulate the ultimate conversation partner.
It is a profound shift from passive studying to active environmental design.
It really is. And looking at all this, it points to a massive paradigm shift in how we view what we are actually doing when we learn a language. I want to leave everyone listening right now with a final, slightly provocative thought to turn over in your mind as you go into your next English conversation.
Okay, let's hear it.
When you look at the mechanics we discussed today, the illusion of words running together, the messy physical metaphors of phrasal verbs, the hesitation of saying, when you formulate a complex thought, you realize something crucial. Language was not designed by engineers. It is not a sterile mathematical equation meant to be perfectly solved. It is a biological, deeply human tool built for connection.
Which means, if true fluency is about human connection, then perhaps the very things you are most terrified of, the mistakes, the messy pronunciations, the pauses, the filler words, perhaps those are actually the most human parts of the language. They are the signals that say to the other person, I am a living, breathing human being, thinking and feeling in real time, right here with you.
You cannot connect with an X-ray. It's too clean. You connect in the blur.
Wow.
So ask yourself, in your relentless pursuit of English fluency, are you trying too hard to sound perfect instead of trying to sound human? Don't be afraid to leave the sterile classroom behind. Jump into the muddy waters. Get a little messy. Keep training those ears. Keep hitting record on your smartphone. And above all, keep diving deep into your incredible learning journey. We will catch you on the next one.